Good afternoon, guys. Dr. Ken Nordberg. I'm back in business again. I've had a little bad health for a few months, but I'm finally pretty much over it now. But we learned a couple months ago that I actually did have a minor stroke in November. That goofed up a lot of things, and some of the orders that people made for my books, it just didn't work out very well during that period. And I'm sorry for that. I'm really sorry for that. I've never had that kind of problem with book sales before, but please believe me, I didn't mean to be careless during that period, but things were not working out pretty well for me at that time. But I've gotten over them, and that was my third stroke, and each one, it takes a little while to get over them, but I feel like I'm completely over it now, and I can't wait for the next deer season at my age. Now, I'm going to talk to you about a subject. I've talked about some of this before, but I'm going to get into more detail about it, because it's so important. I get so many questions and letters from people. I get calls and I get letters and emails, people asking me questions. And most of the time, it just kind of, I just keep thinking, those guys don't know about what I'm going to tell you here today. And you wouldn't be asking all these questions if you knew what I'm going to tell you here, because then it's going to make your hunting a little bit, it's going to make it better. And you'll know why. And that's important to me. So I'm going to go over this subject today. There's two things about this, two parts to this subject. During the hunting season, all deer in the woods, including the biggest buck in the woods where you hunt, spends more than 90% of their time in three places. And those three places can change, but three places. And those three places are, well, here's the map. Let's talk about that a little bit. Here in the middle here is kind of a lowland area. There's some swamps and ponds in there. And there's lots of little dots in there. The red dots in my deer country are really important to our hunting each year, because red dots here stand for lots of red osiers, or red bark dogwood is another name for them. And our deer love to eat those. That's browse. That's their favorite browse in our deer country. Northern Minnesota, northern Wisconsin, northern Michigan, upper Michigan. Their favorite food during the winter. And it's a woody plant. It can actually get to be 10 feet tall, but most of them in the woods never get that big. They get to be 3-4 feet tall at the most, because deer keep eating them back every winter. It's beginning in our area about November 8th. They'll start eating browse. During the first part of the second week in November, they'll quit eating grass. Now all the green spots are places where there's grass growing all summer long. And well, there's other greens that whitetails eat, and they eat acorns and other things, but grass is important in their diet in the summer, from snow melt in the spring until they switch to browse during the second week in November where we hunt. So this is kind of a northern Minnesota-ish kind of map here. And what we got here, the blue is, here's a stream running through this thing, and here's some ponds here, and the stream is running into this one. This is the main one going across the top here. And the red osiers like wet feet. They like lowlands, and but they also like sun. But They are most common where there's plenty of moisture in the soil. And along streams like this, you see a lot of red osiers. And this lowland here is kind of open, grassy, probably some cattails around these pond areas and that kind of thing's kind of open. But the sun hits the ground a lot here, and there's a lot of the kind of grasses that whitetails like to eat during the summer. So this is a major. This is in between. Now this is about a half mile of deer country like where I hunt. Now here's the big guy. He's this big dominant breeding buck. All summer long he lives pretty much alone while he's growing his antlers, and he beds in a little spot. It's maybe only a couple acres in size, but it's kind of really thick, dense timber there. It's the kind of place where you can walk right by one of those buck bedding areas and not see it, not realize it's there. But if you're going to hunt those kind of bucks, it's really important that you learn how to identify bedding areas of really big bucks. That's one of those three places where whitetails spend more than 90% of their time during the hunting season. What's so important about that? Well, we'll get to that in a little bit. But here's his little place here, and he's kind of all alone during the summer. And he feeds, and they're usually close to water during the summer where they bed. So here's the stream, and here's his favorite watering spot right there, just a little ways away. He doesn't have to travel far to get a drink of water. And he can drink 2 to 4 times a day there. Here's a beaver pond on that. Now, these blue spots are like whitetail water spots. They just don't drink water everywhere. They tend to go to traditional little spots year after year, and they'll have well-worn paths right down in the mud next to the water there. And they keep going back there year after year after year. And so there's some blue spots here, like there and there and here, and places, watering spots of whitetails in this half square mile. Now, this big buck here owns all this. This is the northern half of his range. His range is about a square mile in size. Not exactly, but it can be anywhere from 600 to 1,000 acres, actually. And I've only known one buck that had a 2 square mile range. And that's a lot of work for a buck, and he's got to be pretty tough to keep that to himself, to be the big boss in the area. And only buck I've ever known like that, my oldest daughter got it when she was 14 years old. And great big 10-pointer. It's one of the biggest bucks taken by us Nordbergs in all the years that we've been bucking. Well, actually our hunting goes back to 1902. But anyway, that big buck owns all this area here. Now, the does live in smaller ranges. Up where we are now, the wolves got them living in much bigger areas. They don't limit themselves to smaller ranges. But here's a doe range here. And those doe ranges average about 125 acres in size. Some are only 90, some are 200, but the average is about 125 acres. And their bedding in areas are big, about 20 acres in size. And the reason there's a lot of grass in them, all the green stuff here is all kind of, they like deep grass for the fawns. They can lay down flat on the ground there on the deep grass, and the wolf can walk right by them and not realize there's one there, right there, real close by. But they love deep grass for hiding their fawns when they're feeding or drinking water early, when the fawns don't go with them all the time. But they tend to be about 20 acres in size. So this pink here is, that you see here, this is a bedding area of a doe, and this outer line is the doe's home range. And it connects with this lowland here in the middle, right along the edge here. Now, lowlands where we hunt are popular places for whitetails, and not only providing water to drink, but a lot of the plants they like, the grasses, the green leaf things that they like to eat, and the red osiers, and that's where they find most of it, in these damp lowlands, wet lowlands in the swamp. And these lowlands also, especially there's a lot of cattails in there, is a great daytime hiding place for all the whitetails living in this northern half here. They can go out in there, and it's wet in there, but most cattail swamps, there are spots here and there that are higher than the water, and so they can lay down on a dry spot out there. They know where they are. And they can live in there, and it's like a cornfield all the time. You can't get close to deer laying in deep grass like that without them hearing you. And same way, here's a cornfield on the edge of this. All kinds of corn. Corn is so noisy, and if you live in a farm area and where you grow a lot of corn, you know, like say this is a 40-acre cornfield down near the upper edge of it here, you can have a doe and his family living in there all summer long, even into November until the corn is cut. When the corn's cut, then they got to get into some wooded areas in the area. They can't go into another doe's range, she'll chase them out of there. Each doe was young, they don't want any other does around there. But anyway, this is an important area. Now, when these deer that live here, they like this doe and her young includes the yearlings. Yearlings stay with their mothers all during their yearling year. They commonly feed in little spots within the doe ranges. There can be quite a few of those. And they can, if this area joins their range, they'll go out anywhere in there and feed in there as well, and even water in there. Now, here's another doe range over here, right here. And over here is a feeding area. It's got grasses and red osiers, kind of a lowland there. Most stuff in between here is highland, all wooded areas, all full of trees. But anyway, they have little feeding areas and they have big feeding areas. Now, here's another one. That's clear cut. Now, years ago when I first started hunting, deer hunting, most of the logging that was done in the woods was done in squares, like doing a 40-acre square area of the woods. And they cut everything in there. It'd be like a moonscape when they get done. Nowadays, we hunt in federal land, and in federal land, the cuttings almost look like something like this, with a lot of, irregular edges, and that is really a nice way to log. It's really good for wildlife. Edges are good for grouse, and it's good for deer and just about any animals that live in the area there. Over here, this is an old clear cut. And parts of it, you might have lots of grasses kind of open here, good place for them to feed. So this doe might go here and feed. Quite often in this clear cuts are full of good greens for whitetails in the summertime. That's a favorite source of food for them. Clear cuts can be favorite sources for a long, long time. In fact, a lot of this area can grow up to be in woods, and it's not uncommon for parts of it to remain kind of open and be a source of grasses that whitetails love in that clear cut. So, whereas they might not live there, especially if it's a new clear cut, it's a real wide open area. But boy, a lot of the foods whitetails love, even the browse plants like red osiers, and let's say a lot of these, you see those little brown specks there? Let's say those were sugar maple trees, real common in northern Minnesota, sugar maple. Well, wherever they cut a sugar maple and leave a stump, that stump will soon be covered like a bush with red stems. And boy, do whitetails love the red stems on those stumps and clear cuts. So in the fall even, after about the first or the beginning of second week in November, they could be eating out those red stems out for sugar maple stumps all over the place there. Well, this brown thing, by the way, that's a logging road. And then when they're done with logging roads, then they call them forestry roads. And in this case, and it's common where I hunt, there aren't a lot of roads in our woods. It's a fairly roadless country up there. You know, wherever there's a logging road going out in the woods, everybody wants to hunt there. And so there's maybe hundreds of thousands of square miles that are never hunted up in the country where we hunt because there's no logging road going through it. Everybody wants to be on the logging road. But people could hunt along the main road there and hunt quarter mile in, and a lot of that country up there, nobody goes there, nobody hunts there. Some good hunting there. Except now, with the wolf situation, deer numbers down to 3 per square mile, and the wolves really competing with hunters like they did last year. They had a terrible time getting the deer there. So here's something kind of interesting. I'm putting that in, and we'll get back to that, but here's a little trail. You know, the dotted trails are trails us hunters use. I will have some more dotted trails on this map here in a little bit, but here's a so-called food plot. Now, you and I know there's no such thing as a food plot. It's a bait plot. And our deer managers are looking the other way when we're using bait to get deer, you know, planting clover and grasses and turnips and whatnot out in the woods for deer. It's not just to be nice to the deer. It's not, there isn't a food plot in America probably where it doesn't have one or more stand sites next to it. They're built for hunters to take deer. Now, I want to tell you something about that process. Back in 1985, I was invited to spend a winter on a 1,000-acre area owned by a private person, and this private person opened it for bull hunting only, and that was in West Virginia, mountainous area, a beautiful area, a lot of oak trees, a lot of acorns, but. I was invited there because, well, he started this business about 10 years earlier, and he even made tree stands all over for the bull hunters to use. And they'd come in and they'd pay a fee and they'd get to one of these stands, and he'd even take them out there and drive them out there. His business started dropping off because nobody was seeing big bucks anymore. They saw some early when he first started that. But within a few years, they just weren't seeing any, and people weren't going to spend the money just to go shoot a yearling or a fawn. It was antlered bucks only. They weren't shooting fawns, but people didn't want to shoot forkies or spiked bucks. They weren't interested in that. So his business was dropping off, and he wanted me to figure out what the problem was and what he should do to improve it. So what he had is an open field there back of his house, and he had a load all right around the edge, and his stand sites were in the woods along the edges, several. And when he drive them out, people would go to the different ones and they'd use them. They were made with 2x4s and plywood. And next to every one was a corn feeder, an electronic corn feeder. And of course, deer loved the corn and everything. But it was crazy, when I went there, when I was invited there, I spent the winter there, deer were eating in the middle of that open field. They were digging in the snow, and if it wasn't too deep, to get at the grass underneath. And they weren't the adult deer. And they weren't paying any attention to corn feeders. Their young deer, the fawns and yearlings, they would show up. The corn feed was nice. They liked that corn, and they'd hear the thing going, you know. They'd start making noise when it's spewing corn, and they'd come running out there. But no older deer. And this guy that owned the land, he thought they must have shot all the bucks. Well, I did a survey on the land. I spent a week going all the way around this open field up on the top of a mountain. It was steep on the outsides and heavily wooded all the way around. 100 yards in, all the way around, lots of big tracks and droppings made by big bucks. What had happened, the bucks had all learned it's dangerous to go around those stand sites and those corn feeders. And so they quit. they would come out there at night sometimes and feed on any corn that was left over on the ground under those things in the dark. But that was the only time. The only people that were getting bucks, decent bucks off this guy's land were poachers using crossbows along the road, the property going across the front of them. And every once in a while we'd find a blood trail, and the owner would have me trail those deer, and I recovered some, I found them, and some I didn't, depending on how badly they were wounded. But if they ran away, the poachers didn't go after them. But anyway, so I finally got done with that, and I told them, you got lots of big bucks here, all kinds of them. What you need to do is move your stands deeper into the woods. Forget the field. Quit driving these people out there. Make them walk out there to these stands. You could walk with them, but every time you go out there, headlights on like in the morning, and here's the engine and all the deer around the whole thing. So here comes the car. You're talking to them, people get out and they're slamming the doors and they're going in and flashlights and getting up on these 2x4 stands. They know what's going on. The older deer, that's why they're not seeing them. That's not why they're not seeing deer at these corn feeders, the big ones. Lots of big bucks there. You got to get in there deeper, and you got to be more careful about how you get hunters to those stands. You don't go out with a vehicle announcing to all of the deer living around that open field, here we come. And they've learned that that's a bad place to be. And that's what you got to do. Well, he didn't want to believe me, but his business there, this charging people to go bull hunting there, went zero finally. People didn't hunt there anymore because they couldn't get any decent bucks there. But if he had waited maybe 5 years, and he could probably start again, and and at first, maybe in that first year or two, maybe get some more bucks, because they don't live forever, and there's a lot of them new ones there that wouldn't realize those tree stands were dangerous. But that's what's happened to everything we've ever used to try to lure deer to stand sites in my whole lifetime. And I remember some of the buck lures that came out in the beginning. I've shot deer with buck lures that were made from tarsal glands of bucks. I've shot bucks, younger bucks, with their noses in the jar of that kind of stuff, put it on a stump. And then when, in the middle of the 80s, when that doe and estrus lure scent came out, well, every buck in the woods, from a spiked buck to the big 10-pointers, they were all suckers for that doe and estrus lure scent, for the urine of a doe in heat. And that worked really good for, well, we started using them in 1985 and in 1986, and during that period I filmed a 12-hour video series called Whitetail Hunter's World. It was sponsored by this guy that owned that land up there, that bow hunting land. And anyway, we were just getting all kinds of pictures of big bucks, attracted to that odor. It just really worked so good in there. I remember I was reading in the magazines, and people could do all kinds of goofy things. They'd put some of that on a rag and put it on a string and drag it behind them to a tree stand, and after a while here comes a buck following that trail to the tree stand. You could use it just about any way you wanted, and you could get a buck. And that was really great that year, and that made bow hunting really a popular sport, because you get deer right up there, lure them up right up next to your stand, and real easy shots, and it just revolutionized deer hunting and stand hunting. Stand hunting wasn't as popular sport before that happened, but it made it a really good one. But like everything we've ever used to lure or bait deer to a stand site, the dumb deer, the ones that were vulnerable to that we ate them, and the others we didn't. And so there was a time when almost everybody had a big buck, and every bow hunter, like in western Wisconsin, everybody had the bow hunters there, everybody had one at least scoring at least 190 on the wall. And they thought, doesn't everybody have one like that on the wall? Well, the point I'm making is, anything we've come up with all these years, you know, and I've been at it a long time now, it'd be my, I think this is my 79th deer season coming up. I've been hunting deer for 79 years. And I've been doing these studies of whitetails and their behavior. Been just really fascinating since 1960, so that's a long time. And I've been writing about this ever since 1980, so I've learned a lot about whitetails and you know, and hunting them. But this business of trying to lure deer to tree stands just isn't good anymore. There isn't hardly a big buck in this country that hasn't seen everything in the woods that people are doing. Just imagine how easy it is from, you know, they figured out the doe and estrus lure scent that you can buy in the store doesn't smell like the same as the doe and estrus lure scent emitted by a live doe. And when they smell a live doe, they also smell other odors. They smell, you know, does have plenty of odors. And next time you have one in camp, you guys bring one, sniff that doe. You says all kinds of odors coming off that doe. And if they smell this pheromone drifting downwind of the air, produced by a real live doe, they also smell the doe, the other odors of the doe, so they know that's a doe and that's in estrus. But the stuff that comes out of the bottle doesn't have those odors of a doe. It's just, they're just smelling the urine and the doe and the pheromone that's in the urine during the short time that they're in heat. And each doe is only in heat for 24 to 26 hours. How about that? Real. But they aren't all on the same day. They get scattered down over a 2-week period. But anyway, well, when they smell the stuff out of the bottle, they don't smell the doe, but they smell the man. Because anytime a buck smells the stuff from the bottle and he's downwind, he's going to smell the man. And the man's going to be in the same area as where that odor is coming from. So he smells human odor, and no matter what you do, you know, you should know that by now. There's nothing that can completely hide or get rid of human odors. Deer hunting is this. You're going to hear me talking about that a lot this coming year. So they can smell, oh, that's not a real live doe, I'm not going over there. And that's pretty much the way it is. And tree stands the same way. When I first started, I was one of the first people in America to really start using tree stands a lot. And I used to write a lot about it. I know I had a lot of influence, got a lot of people to start going up the trees to hunt deer in the beginning in the 1980s and early 1900s. But I started stand hunting in 1960. But anyway, it was the same thing. When we started getting up the trees, you know, I had to go up 6 feet. And you could have deer right under you, feeding right under your platform, back there. They'd come so close you could touch them. The point there is they learned to avoid tree stands as well. Okay, after I said all the things I just said, let's get back to the map. Now you see this little green square up here? That's a food plot. Somebody planted clover, some kind of grass, you know, seeds, or turnips, or there's all kinds of things people are planting out in the woods now. And not for the pleasure of the deer, but to attract deer to a stand site. There's a little X here. Now, let's talk about that a little bit. That little square was not a garden patch to start with. There was woods in there. And these guys, you guys that are making food plots in the woods, you're putting a lot of work into this. You know, it's not something you do in one afternoon. You know, go out there and cultivate that ground and whatever else you want to do, and plant seeds and that kind of thing. And then after you plant it, you go back there every once in a while. In fact, a lot nowadays, almost anybody that makes a food plot puts a camera, a trail cam out there to see what they're getting in there in the food plot. And they go back there often. They're real curious. Gee, I wonder if there's any big bucks eating that clover or whatever. Now, some years ago, a hunter in northern Wisconsin asked me to come and do a survey on his land because he had a 700-acre plot there, and went through a series of things that were advised of him to do. And when he turned that nice woods, it was a dense woods, had a lot of deer in it, into a park-like area, and he had areas where we even had a little cabin with a bench rest in and then he had this, I don't know if they were turnips or what they were, that a patch of them down about 100 yards away, and he could sit in the cabin, and he had dreams of taking big bucks, and he could see way over there all this place. But they weren't seeing it. He and his friends and his family got lots of 2.5-year-old bucks. But they weren't getting the bigger, older bucks, the bucks that were 4.5 years of age or older, up to 6.5 years of age. And he was wondering why. It's like this guy in West Virginia. And I went out there and I looked at it, and because he had not only this little cabin, but he had really nice tree stands. They were put up with front-end loaders, and they had a urinal in them, and they had a stove, and electric windows that would open silently and get ready for the shot and that kind of thing. And palaces up there. But they weren't seeing any big bucks. It was the same problem as what was happening in West Virginia. We had a patch, an area right next to the Wisconsin, upper Michigan border, where they didn't do anything. And it was, we walked into that area, right away there's antler rubs and ground scrapes and big tracks and droppings in that woods that hadn't been covered. And all the rest of the 700 acres, those big bucks weren't showing up in because of what all the things that done. And he had a bulldozer, and he had roads, and golf carts go up, drive everywhere, go to stands and things like that. He was doing the kind of stuff that this guy in West Virginia was doing. And though our bucks nowadays, the older ones, they're not stupid. They don't get to be 4.5 years. How many times have deer, there's all kinds of deer in the woods that are 4.5 years of age or older, and every one of them has seen every trick humans have used now throughout their lifetime, and you just can't fool them with this kind of stuff anymore. I had got a letter from a guy who makes food plots, and he was talking about he makes 9 every year. And I asked him, how come he has to make 9 every year? Because one wasn't working so good, I guess. And that person had 9. I'm sure he wouldn't, if I talked to him today, he'd tell me the same thing. Even all the deer in the area, once they learn about what this guy was doing, that they treat that guy he's as dangerous as the guy doing this lure scent bought in a bottle in the store. So they stay away from him. And not only that, people who make food plots, they keep going back there. You see the pictures on the internet from the trail cams they've been using. They go out there pretty regular and get pictures all the time of these decent bucks before this hunting season starts. Well, they're food plots, and they can't wait. Oh boy, it's going to be great. Every time they go, they decrease the probability they'll ever see a buck there during the hunting season. Because you know why? Trail scents. Deer hunters don't think about trail scents. They walk in the woods, it's just like, but wherever you walk, the scent molecules are coming from your body, and they fall to the ground behind you, and they form a carpet, and wherever you step, of odors. Now, those odors don't last forever. Most of them will fade away within 4 days. Some will last longer. I mean, if they're like fuel, gasoline odors or oil or cooking odors, Stronger odors can last maybe a week or more. But, you know, if it's in a buck's range, you know, within his range, he's gonna show up there every once in a while. And if every time he comes here, you find a place that's just full of trail scents made by a hunter, renewed often. You know, there's strong trail scents. You can go in there once and don't go back there anymore for weeks. Those trail scents fade and that buck will forget about it. But if he, every time he goes there, there's kind of fresh trail scents all around this area. And right away, today's buck, any buck that's 4.5 years of age or older, those are the trophy class bucks, they know that this is this is a place where a human spends a lot of time, and that means it's dangerous here, especially during hunting seasons, once the hunting season starts. So that's what you're doing. So, you know, it doesn't matter if you're using turnips or a grunt call or rattling antlers or apples or corn or whatever. None of those things, baits and lures, our older bucks have got you figured out, and your odds of taking a big buck like that are not very good. The best place to take a big buck is where they don't know, that you've never hunted before. There's nothing there to, you know, it's just what you do every time you do something different each year. Never done before, never hunted this spot before, never hit myself as well as I did this year before. That spot is totally unexpected by a buck, especially if you're really careful about it. Like maybe you find this place, go up there one weekend looking for scan sites. Oh boy, I'm going to hunt this spot for some reason. We're going to talk a lot about that too in future talks here. But what makes a good buck stand site? But anyway, the more often then you go lay there around, you get all set, you make a tree stand, you put stuff in the tree, and you're pruning things all around there. You got it so that you can get an arrow or a bullet through over here without it being deflected. So the more time you spend there from that time on, the less chances are that even there where you've never hunted before, the chances get smaller and smaller and smaller that you're going to take a buck there. In other words, you got to start thinking in terms of how can I use a new spot that I've never found before without poisoning it with a lot of trail scents and with a lot of changes that older bucks spot right away. And you can't believe how small the change can be. They'll spot it and they'll back away from that area and not come back. But anyway, here's one of those. We've talked about that a little bit now. Now here's this road. Here's another thing. If there's a trail like that going through the woods, how many of you guys, like let's say this is across here, this distance is a mile. How many of you, so let's say you camped over here, this clear cut, or you parked your vehicle there. How many of you are willing to walk over here without riding a snowmobile or an ATV or UTV? If you got to drive in there with a motorized vehicle, you're announcing that every deer in this area, every one of them, here comes a hunter, or here comes several hunters. That's the sound you make. You know, years ago, people, when those ATVs first came out, the tricycles, the three-wheelers, I knew some guys that hunted in the area were re-hunted back in those days that bragged about never shooting a deer except from the seat of their ATV. And that was because in the beginning, when those ATVs started going all over the woods, that was something new to deer, and they didn't realize they were dangerous, and they were kind of curious about them even. Nowadays, remember, I don't know if you're old enough, you probably remember the days when you could drive down a country road and there was some deer over there feeding on maybe a farm field right there. You could stop and they'd keep feeding. But today, if you stop, they go. You know that. You know, why did they do that? Because they were a vehicle that stops where they are that's a dangerous situation. Well, same way with an ATV or a snowmobile. And then, let's say you're a deer out in the woods and you're right here, and this thing stops right there. That eerie thing, that happening, here comes it, comes running along, so all of a sudden it stops. That means there's hunters right here now, right here. And if you're right there, you think, oh man, they could show up here any minute. I'm getting out of here. I'll go over here somewhere. That's just like rattling antlers or rut calls, all those things that used to work. They don't work so good anymore. And these motorized vehicles you guys are using out in the woods, you can't go anywhere without riding instead of walking. You're ruining your hunting with that. And those things have lots of odors to them. You know, the exhaust, which gets on your clothing, and the burning oil smell, and the rubber from the tires, and all that kind of, there's a lot of rubber smell that comes off of a snowmobile, that kind of thing. Those are trail scents that are killing your hunting, as what, just as sure as if you were walking bare feet out there and leaving your foot odors all over the woods. So anyway, and the sounds nowadays, we never go to stand sites using an ATV. It's just, if you want to hunt bucks, you just walk. Get up a little earlier like we get up. If I know I've got a hike that's going to last at least an hour, I'm on the trail by 5 o'clock in the morning. You know, I've had breakfast, I've gotten up, gotten dressed, had breakfast and all that. But I'm on my trail by 5 o'clock in the morning, and because it's going to take me an hour to get to that stand site that I want to use this day. Okay, now let's go back again a little bit further. Another thing that's like all these things that people do, people are still, you know, they think all they need is a tree stand, a portable, and some of that lure scent, and they're in business for buck hunting. Do that year after year, and go to the same spot year after year. That's the same thing. It's bad. You're putting trail scents on the ground there. The more often you go there, the longer you spend there, the sooner and big bucks are going to find out. Once they do, they're going to avoid that for the rest of their lives. You know, it might be only 2 more, 3 more years in their life, but they're going to avoid that spot once they learn that this is where you are sitting in that tree, and you've made it easier for them to figure out where you are by blowing on a grunt call and using the lure sign. It's not the lure sign. Well, that's a man, because there's no doe odor that goes with it. There's a man over there. So once they've figured these things out, it makes it really easy to stay away from you. It's one thing to find a really good spot, and I want you to learn how to recognize what is a really good spot, and this is kind of basic here right now. So, well, obviously I'm not going to be able to finish this YouTube seminar in one session. It's going to take more. You know, you're going to see this map again next time I talk to you. But we're starting to get now closer now. You're starting to realize there's some things you've been doing very, very, very wrong for years. And that's why it's been hard for you to take deer, especially older deer. You know, deer that are, if you want a big buck, he's going to have to be 4.5 to 6.5 years of age. And not very many get to be 7.5. But if you want a buck like that, just imagine now, after what you've learned so far, how much you've been doing wrong, why it's been so hard for you to get a deer like that. And even under the best circumstances, I think I've been really good at hunting older bucks, my 3 sons and I. We've taken 111 since 190, the 4 of us. That's pretty darn good buck hunting. Even with the wolves, you know, lots of wolves where we hunt. Here's another thing. Let's say you use this trail, and you're AVT, and you park here, and you go, oh, this would be a really good spot. A lot of grass here. I'm going to sit in a tree right here next to this feeding area. there's water out there, and oh, all the deer around here like to feed deer, and the big buck even goes there if the doe's in estrus, that kind of thing. So you get there. Now, once you put one there, then you can't sleep till the opener. And let's think about that a little bit. Now, let's say it's you're the opener, and a common wind for us on opening weekend. I don't know why it is, but a common wind. It just happens at least 90% of the time. Our common winds on opening weekend are from the southeast to the southwest, coming that way. Well, if you had one here, and that's where you were going to go sit, and you had a south wind, where's your scent going? It's going out into this feeding area. Now, you might think, well, maybe I'll get lucky. A lot of guys think that. And they don't have any choice anyway. That's where they put all their marbles on getting to this one spot. You know, go out here with their ATV and park here, and then go climb this tree here and sit there. And you got a south wind. And if that's the only place you were planning to hunt, you know, for the whole hunting season, you've wrecked it right away opening morning by sitting there with a south wind, and with the wind at your back going out there. You wreck this whole feeding area. Because any deer out there, boy, they're going to get, because your scent will spread downwind as widely if the wind is light, a little more narrowly. But any deer moving around out in this big feeding area here is going to soon know you're there, because they keep moving. They don't just come out here and eat here and then go somewhere else. They keep moving. And anyway, so bingo, you've ruined it right away. Well, let's say, well, in that case, I'm going to put another one over on this side. So if I got a south wind now, then they can't smell me. Well, how are you going to get there without them knowing you're there? Because you know what's going to happen. Those deer are going to be out there at 4 o'clock in the morning already, starting to feed. When you get here in the morning, in the dark, in the morning, they're there already. How are you going to get there with a south wind without deer and they're knowing about it? You ever think about that? You know, maybe you haven't. You know, theoretically, probably what you should do instead of driving your vehicle down here and parking in one place, or you park it here and now walk, maybe finally have to walk over here because there's no roads. But still, your scent's going all over out in this area to get there. So you got to think about it. So probably the best thing to do is go around on this side to get there. And that way your scent's going this way, and all the deer in there aren't going to smell you. So what you should be thinking of, you know, like you're out there before the season, where should I hunt? Well, you go out here. Now, if that's really a good feeding area, there's all kinds of things that tell you it's a good feeding area. If they're just eating grass, sometimes it's hard to tell if that's a feeding area. There could be 15 deer feeding out in here every day, and if they're just eating grass, it's hard to tell. You can get on your hands and knees and try to see where, you know, actually where the crops cut. You know, got a lot of grass and ripped it off, but it's hard to see. A feeding area, when they're feeding, they're not just walking on trails. They're walking off trail when they're feeding and going wherever the food is, or like say it's in November and they're eating these osiers, they're just zigzagging all over the place in there. They're going this way and that way, and they keep moving. They don't just stay in one place and eat for an hour. They keep moving. And so anyway, but in a good feeding area, one thing you're going to find a lot of is tracks, off-trail tracks, not on deer trails, but off deer trail tracks. Tracks off-trail, fresh and old ones that were made maybe weeks earlier, and fresh ones just made yesterday or this morning before you got here. There's tracks, fresh tracks going in there. So lots of tracks that aren't on trail, that's one sign. lots of droppings made by whitetails off trail, because they're emptying their balls all the time while they're feeding. There's going to be, you'll find deer droppings all over a good feeding area. And then the foods they eat, like all those red dots, all those red osiers are out there. And when they eat the top stems off of an osier, the tenderest ones, the juicy stems, red bark, tan stems with buds on them, when they don't just bite them off clean because they don't have upper front teeth. Just look, if you didn't realize that, look in the deer's mouth sometimes, there's no upper front teeth. They get a hold of it and rip it off. And so it's kind of a fuzzy tip, you know, it's jaggedy, and it's white. And you go in a place where there's a lot of red osiers, and you look around and there's all kinds of white tips all over the place in there. And tracks all over the place, off trail. And droppings all over the place off trail. Man, that's where you want to be opening morning. There's a lot, that's the place, kind of place where you want to be hiding. That's a feeding area. You might find some beds in the feeding area. Usually the beds are fawn beds because fawns get done feeding before their mothers because they're small deer. And so they lay down here and there and their mother keeps moving. They get up and move with them, but you might find little short beds 3 feet long made by a fawn in there, in the grass, deep grasses. So that's another one. So anyway, when you're out in the woods, you're looking for a feeding area. You're looking for a place where there's a lot of tracks, a lot of droppings off trail, not on deer trails, but off trail. You don't have to have a lot of well-worn trails. You might have a well-worn trail going from here to here from this doe range. You want to go out here and feed. You might have one here. It looks like the ground's all torn up with the hoofs, sharp edges of hoofs. Looks like, holy cow, have they been using this trail? A lot of guys when they find a trail like that, a lot of guys say, that's where I want to hunt. Look at, boy, it looks like 100 deer have been using this trail, and there's bound to be a big buck among them. When you see trails like that, those are made by doe families, the does and with their fawns and yearlings. You know, it could be 5 deer going back and forth there every day, and they're making a trail really, really look good. Well, the only time you're probably going to see a buck on that trail is when that doe's in heat. And that doe is going to only be in heat in the month of November for a period of 24 to 26 hours. So what are your odds of seeing a big buck on that trail? Almost 0. But when that doe is in heat, that buck here is certainly going to be with her. When she's in heat, So during that 2-week period of time, if you're really determined to get that big buck, you're going to want to spend time at this feeding area. But not all one spot. You put it in a different spot, but pretty soon every deer that lives in this area are going to know you're there because they're so good at finding hunters in trees now. And trail scents are the big tip-off. And sounds you make, movements you make. They spot movements now up in trees 400 yards away. When you're sitting up there and if you're moving around, you're standing there looking around, head going around like a deer, if this is fairly open, a deer, and you're in a tree here, a deer over here can see you. They'll spot that movement. And if it's blaze orange movement, they know that's a hunter. But they're gonna be real suspicious about it. Easy for them to figure out safely if that's a human or not. They can just go over this way somewhere, and boys, does even will make it a point to do that in older bucks. Is that a human or not? They'll circle around to get downwind of you. Yeah, that's a human, all right. You know, they're within the area we've hunted now. We've in the several square miles we've hunted since 1990. My sons and I, and then daughters and friends and other relatives and grandsons now. We've used hundreds of tree stands and ground level stand sites in all those years since 1990. Only 4 have ever enabled us to take another with 1 or more bucks from the same site in all that. Can you imagine? Boy, that's pretty lousy odds. If you say, oh, I got a hot spot in the woods, big buck hot spot, got a picture of one. Well, look at this buck. That's where I'm going to get him, right here. Your odds of seeing a buck again the 2nd year, the 3rd year, 5th year, or what, are so lousy, it's unbelievable. But hunters keep doing that. I don't know, it's kind of amazing. Or you keep believing that, oh, there's a big buck hotspot here. This one, I'm going to get a big one. So, you know, what I just said, only 4 of all the stand sleds that we've ever used in that whole area, all these years, have enabled us to take a 2nd or more bucks in following years. That many. Now, 2 of them actually enabled one of my sons, Ken, to take 5 years in a row. And they've been deader than doornails ever since. He goes back to them once in a while. Check, see if no sign there, doesn't go there anymore. But what hunter, let's say you got a 10-pointer there last year and I got a 10-pointer over here. Where do we want to go this year? Huh? Oh boy, we're going to go back that spot to relive that chance to take the big buck. And you can sit there for year after year after year, day after day after day, and never see another big buck there. Because in the process, you know, you were lucky the first time because no buck in the area expected you. Your trail signs, any changes you made, cutting branches and things like that, fixing up a tree stand or a ground level stand, a blind, they all spot the differences so quickly. They live there every day, you know, and they're so sharp that they can live where their wolves are hunting them every day, year round. And you get out there and you think you can walk all over the woods and they'll never forget you. That's crazy. They remember you for the rest of their lives and where you hunt and where you use it. And once they find a hot spot, the hot spot that they are thinking about is one that's full of human trail scents and changes that the hunter made. And you know, the changes can be little things. You know, I just learned this in the last couple of years. One of the things I like to do, I'm a ground level hunter now. My boys won't let me climb trees anymore because of my age. So I'm ground level. I'll make a blind. If I got a spot where I want to hang, but there's just no good place to sit, I'll make a blind. Well, I'm already learning that's almost a mistake right there, because whatever you do to change the look of a place, they're going to spot it. Boy, if the buck will come along the first time he sees this change you made, it's awful. Well, I used to take dead trees and pile them up, make a pile of dead trees, and you get out in front, oh, there's some openings on, and then we go and cut a whole bunch of evergreen boughs and fill them in the holes. And the more we did that, the less those kind of blinds worked. I think the first thing, when a buck's walking along the woods and he looks and he sees this pile of brush with evergreen boughs stuck all through it, That's a Nordberg ambush site. So you can't, and the odors are there, and concentrated odors around. What's the first thing? You walk into the woods, let's say certain things, say, oh man, this is going to be a good spot to get a big buck. And maybe you're right about that. But here's another thing we've learned. We keep track of numbers like this. We've learned, that was a terrible thing to learn, but on the average, whenever you make a new stand site, if it truly is where in the vicinity of where a big buck is spending his time right now, he'll find it within the first 1 to 3 hours you hunt there. If you're not in that vicinity, well, you can sit there all week and maybe the buck will never find it because he never goes there. Most hunters don't think about those kind of things. They only think about, well, a lot of them, they go out in the woods and say, well, gee, I could see a deer way over there. The more you can see, farther you can see, the more deer you're going to see, and the more of them are going to be big bucks, so this is the place I want to be. When that's just the opposite of what the buck's thinking. When the deer season comes by, I'm not going to walk across through an open area like that. I'm going to stay away from there because they know that's dangerous to be going in a place where they can be seen moving around long distances away. Nowadays, most hunters aren't really careful about concealment either. And most hunters are hunting trees, and they get in the trees, and there's no leaves on them, and no matter what you do, you can see there's this big dark blob like a bear up there in that tree. And our older bucks are looking for that big black object in trees all the time. And generally, they are quickly made aware of the fact that that's a human because it moves. You just have to be looking this way when that deer is looking. I wonder if that's a human. And then the human goes like this. Yeah, that's a human. They see little birds move. They look over there. A little squirrel running in a tree. That motion gets their eyes. They look at it. Oh, yeah, there it goes running up along the branch. That's a squirrel. Deer eyes are real sensitive to motion. It took us years and years of learning to be really good at becoming invisible to bucks as stand hunters. But we had to go through more changes. Every year it got to the point where every damn big buck living in this area where we hunt knows how we do it. Knows what our stand sites look like. And we had to stop doing everything the same. And you just couldn't, because if you did, once they learned it, and so every year we've had to do something different. And one of the first things we do every year to make sure we get to do something different is use new stand sites every year. Stand sites, they've never found us there ever before. They don't expect us to be there. And if you do things right, they still won't be expecting you there on opening day. Or during the hunting season. We'll even get to that. A lot of the stand sites we use, we find during the hunting seasons because we've recognized, we've gotten to be good at that. Well, come along, boy, this is a spot to get a big buck. It almost smells like a big buck here. And sometimes it does smell like a big buck there. Most guys can go right through that without even noticing. I remember in my hunting schools, I used to take classes, guys from all over America would come to my classes, and I'd take 20 a year. We'd go for a walk in the woods, and I'd walk right through some of the best feeding areas you ever saw. And not one of them ever saw anything that would suggest to them it was a feeding area. Until I stopped and started teaching them, look at this, and look at this, and look at this. Well, they couldn't believe it. And so there's so much American hunters don't know today, and we're suckers for all these lures. We go into a sporting goods store and there's everything, and the minerals and all the mineral. I won't even get into that right now. It's all kind of crazy. So anyway, let's get back here. One more thing here. So we said, well, okay, there's one here. Now, if you were smart, you would go through the woods, try to stick to really heavy forest cover, and he'd have another stand site over here for opening weekend. Here, get one here. Now, this one would be good for a lot of wind direction. Like if you were sitting down here, I'd say next to the stream here in this feeding area, it's a good area because they go down there to drink water and that kind of besides. But it's a good one for the north, and northwest, northeast, west, and east even, up to a point. You know, if you're sitting here and you got a west wind blowing, your scent is going like a fan downwind. And it's getting out there. So if you're going to be sitting in a west wind at that one, you want to be here, not here, because your scent's going to be getting out there. You're going to go here, it's going over there, and it won't be in the feeding area. But let's say, well, if you only had one, you know, if you're lucky, the wind directions were good for you, but the west wind wouldn't be so good there. But if you came around this side, the west wind would be blowing that way. That's fine. Or if it's a east wind is blowing this way, oh yeah, that's okay too. But if it's really from the northwest or the northeast, that's not any good. You know, I said something about east wind coming this, but you wouldn't want to be coming in this way with the east wind down kind of wind because you're sent to be going out here and the deer are out there in the morning. So you'd want to come in from this side and sit over on this side somewhere. So you might want 2 or 3 stand sites up around a big feeding area like this. But you got to be thinking about how you're going to get there without the wind, without the deer smelling you. But if you got 2 or more, there's usually a safe, you're okay. You'll be able to hunt every day there for a little while anyway. What direction the wind is because if you got 2 of them facing each other, one on this side, one on this side, there's always a way that you can get to that stand site without deer inside that feeding area smelling it. So, but if you only got one, you're stuck and it can be ruined. Not only ruined the stand site, but the whole feeding area if the wind is at your back. Well, there's a lot more. We're going to go through more things on this map, talking about things like that. But now you're learning something. You want to get a big buck, you kind of do things like this. And you say, oh, that's just too much work. Well, that's too bad. But that's what you're going to do. So, with that, I'm going to say goodbye here now, and before I go, be sure to subscribe, hit that subscribe button, and also give me a thumbs up, hit that thing too, and I appreciate it. And with that, I want to say bye now, and I'll see you again soon. Be sure to visit my website. Here's the link. Here you'll find links to my blog posts, my Twitter account, my YouTube account, my Amazon store with links to my ebooks, my son's eBay store, a money saver if you're ordering from Canada or other countries, my website bookstore, and much more.